Hi everyone, I've got Ben Taylor and Rachael Bennett Howells from Wycliffe College here today. They've been doing some individual meetings with their staff and found it very profitable. So I've asked them to come in today and just share their findings really. So Ben, do you want to start us off? How did your meetings go last term? How did you set it up? What was your purpose? And what sort of thoughts have you got?
Yeah, it went really well. Obviously, you came in for that chat, and it was something that you suggested we have a go at. We're separate in terms of our games and our P department. So Rachel and I are in an office away from the P department, which is obviously a lot of the game staff as well. And I think the assumption was, that the information I've given out over the past few years and Rachel since joining was all clear and concise, and everyone knew what it was doing. And you suggest having some meetings one-to-one, just to sort of have a review and make them open and honest. So we had these meetings, and it was very much, we sort of set aside an hour. We had 15 members of staff we wanted to do, so it could have been 15 hours, and it turned out to be 15 hours. And we split it half and half as best we could, and very neutrally sort of didn't decide, right, you have that one, I get on with this one. It was sort of, let's just split them. And we had conversations, and we said to everyone, come with your own ideas, your own agenda, your own thoughts. We're not going to sort of formally set anything. It's just a chance for you to ask any awkward questions. And the list of questions that you gave us as well, which might be good for everyone to share with everyone, were really useful. So we picked a few of those out, which were, some uncomfortable things perhaps. So one of the questions was something that I've done in the past few years that you've been unable to get on board with, and that was actually provoked some really good questions. Then following all those meetings, we sort of collated it all, discussed it all, and then had a feedback to the whole department before Easter, and now post-Easter we had our first meeting yesterday where we're feeding back on individual things that we sort of learned and things we're going to take forward.
Yeah, I think it was the realization that maybe we haven't had so much contact time with individuals within the department as much as maybe we like to. I think those individual conversations are really valuable, and how much opportunity do they have to come and talk to us in a one-on-one environment as much as we get to talk to them. So it was very much an open forum to start with, and that was really nice. And for me, especially only starting in September, it was really nice to kind of have their view and of how they found Wycliffe to start with. And then those structured questions did really provoke some good answers, and has led us into what we're doing now, which is evaluating our whole department and our culture and our way forward with our vision of what we want the sport at Wycliffe to be, because we are in a changing environment with the demographic of our pupils as much as our size of our school. So it's really helping us to shape what we want our programme to look like, and as part of that is important to get everybody else on board and to have their ideas inputted within that format as well.
Yeah, it sounds great, because obviously one of the things we were talking about at the conference was that only 50% of directors of sport have regular meetings with their heads, and we sort of thought, well, if that's going up, we need to make sure we're seeing our staff going down. So I'm sure some directors of sport might think this is a bit daunting, 15 hours, but you've got a whole term. Was it daunting? What, on reflecting in it, was it time worth spent? And what other reflections did you have on the process?
I think, yeah, it was when you first we sat down and thought, 'cause obviously if you go through the whole wider game staff and you've got the external coaches that come in, you've got, we could have been up to 20, 30 people, or, the staff who, the psychology teacher who takes a rugby team, we could have been going really deep into it, but we just went for the full-time PE and game staff and the full-time coaches, and we went through those. And yeah, initially, like, crikey, when we put the names down, realised there's 15, crikey, there's sort of 7-8 hours each. How are we going to fit this in? But actually we sort of threw it out to them, and we weren't going to say, you've got to have a meeting with us. It's very much, we want to do this, we'd like to have a meeting, please name your time. We're very fortunate that neither of us have a timetable. We cover prep to senior school, but we don't have a teaching timetable in the morning. So whilst every afternoon we're out on the games field, every morning our timetable is sort of us to manage in terms of meetings and prep school, senior school, etc. And everyone came forward and said, yeah, like a meeting. And I think the number of meetings didn't feel that bad at all, actually. And the questions, whilst, I was in a meeting with one member of staff, and I really wanted to ask the difficult question, what couldn't you get on board with? What have I done you couldn't get on board in the past? And actually, it's just a one-on-one. It's a really good conversation in that right environment, because sometimes, in the heat of the moment, or something's gone wrong, and why have you not got on board? But in this environment, it was really, really good, and got some really positive feedback from it, and something to take forward. And it was also nice for all parties to go into the meeting knowing that this is, we're not going to sit here and come back with answers. We just want to listen to your ideas. There might be a bit of things we'll come back with, but we're not going to come back with answers and justification. It's just let us know. And one of the most interesting things for me was actually from meetings that Rachel had. So I've been here 6 years, and Rachel's been here for this is her first year. She came back and fed back to me as I did in my meetings, and wanted some of the feedback. And I said, oh, but they know that, but they should know that. And I got quite frustrated about it. And then actually I thought, well, okay, I thought they knew that. I assume they knew that. I think they should know that, but they clearly don't. And I think if it is, I got a bit responsive, a bit sort of frustrated, and actually then, okay, but they clearly don't know that. Why don't they know that? What haven't I done in my communication that I could have done better in the past? And actually it gives us a chance to slow down and reflect rather than have to respond immediately.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, I love the long win. Kath Bishop would say, we need clarity. And how many times have we seen, or even when we're coaching, I told him or her not to do that. And sometimes you got to dig a bit deeper, haven't you? And I think as well, the point you made there was really good, Ben, about when you have an individual conversation one-on-one, people are a lot more open and there's less tension. In a group situation, it can be difficult to speak your mind, but if you give people that opportunity by, as you've done, asking those vulnerable questions, people really do come on board, don't they? What about continuing, Rachel? Do you think this is something you'll continue moving forward?
Yeah, I think it has been really valuable, and it's something that, and it was really interesting. You talk about communication styles, and obviously we've reflected on ours. This environment, it can be quite daunting to say what you feel, but it was amazing going through a lot of those meetings that we had, that actually a lot of them had the same ideas and the same questions and the same concerns that they had throughout, but they didn't know each other had the same ones. So I suppose whenever we really meet together, it is all together, but actually it's really valuable for us to have those one-to-one meetings, and for them to feel like they can tell us and discuss stuff with us without being responsive. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that we will continue to do, especially as we are now evaluating our games program and our offering. It's important for us to ensure that they're on the ground, and they're taking different groups and different students, and if it's not working, or if there's something that we can change, they're the environments that they can come and tell us and be really honest about it. And that's what we want. We want it to be really open, and we want that them all to feed into a really positive environment here. And I think if they have that opportunity and empower them to be able to come and speak to us, that's what breeds that positivity.
Yeah, I think, you use some great language there, Rachel, about culture and purpose. It starts being we and our, and they start using we and our. And actually having visited you, I think this is something you two do really well. Assistant director sport, working really, really well together. And then when you have those meetings, I'm sure the pair of you, but with your department, when the language starts being, we did that, or you could even say to one of your team, oh, Johnny had this great idea, which again builds back into another one of Kath Bishop's long win things, that connection, isn't it? The whole team is connected. So yeah, that sounds fantastic.
I feel like sometimes you can be concerned when you're an assistant director of sport, or me and new as an assistant director of sport and a director of sport, that I always feel like that I have to come up with, it has to be led from us, and kind of led downwards. But I don't think that that's the case. And there's so many valuable experiences that people within our department have, and so much varied skill sets, that we need to use that and use them to make the best program we can, which is ultimately what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, in the room, you've probably got all the answers, haven't you? But we've never got all the answers. But schools got so many different experts, haven't they, with different experiences, that we can lean on them and make our programs better. So let's say I was a director of sport, Ben. This will be going out at the end of June, and I'm thinking about September. How do you think they should sort of prepare for this in September? And what are the benefits for you?
I think it's just going for it. It's realizing that we are all ridiculously busy, and I just said that we haven't got a timetable. I know many directors of sport have got a timetable. That's something we discussed at PADSIS, and we're very fortunate. And every school sort of looks over the fence and thinks the grass is perhaps greener and time-wise, or they've got more time. but I think make the time. And even if it's a break time, as I said, we sort of set aside an hour, but it doesn't have to be an hour. And I'm hoping that going forward, the next time we have a meeting, there won't be as much to discuss, because not the first one, it's the add-on, and it might be a bit of feedback from the next one. And as the process goes on, it gets easier. But I can't tell you how valuable it's been, sort of getting an understanding across the board in one-to-one meetings, because it's so diverse as well, isn't it? You've got rugby, you've got hockey, you've got rowing, you've got squash, and all the other sports. And for example, our rowing program is very, very much elite based rather than recreational based, compared to something like our netball and our hockey and our football, which is obviously, sort of some good top end players, but also mass participation. And it's in a games meeting, when you're talking about 90% of the program, which is the main school games, someone like perhaps rowing or squash, who are a much smaller program but more elite, are sort of sitting there going, well, this doesn't have relevance to me. Giving everyone an hour of your time or half an hour of your time suddenly gives them much more relevance and gives them that buy-in, rather than being, and I'm sure other schools have got maybe a stronger sport that perhaps sits on the outside because it's not as relevant to the mass participation, or vice versa. And having that just for us has just brought everyone together. And we had our first full feedback meeting on everything, which is very much us talking before Easter. And we said, unashamedly, this is going to be us feeding back on everything that you fed in. So this is, we are going to talk. And then we had our first meeting yesterday, and we decided to use that on culture, because we sort of set our these are the main things we're going to discuss in the future, and culture was yesterday. And we started off doing our presentation, and we had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 slides. And and we looked at something that Damien Hughes said, who spoke at PADS this 4 or 5 years ago, about everyone in a room will nod and say, yeah, we agree with that culture, we agree with that culture, but it's all behaviours. So we thought, rather than us telling people what our culture is going to be, we discussed it, and the whole hour meeting was just a big discussion. And we went through one slide, which is all we needed to, and everyone discussed behaviours that we model and behaviours that pupils model. And it's just much more than we could go in going, well, we've come up with a really fancy presentation, all these really cool words, and everyone's going to go, yeah. But everyone came in and fed into it, and we did very little, which is sometimes quite hard to do, because you feel like you've got to lead it, but actually by leading it, it's letting them lead it.
It came from the feedback from them that our games meetings are a bit more of a, I didn't want to use a tick box exercise, but something that we feel like we have to complete. And we were actually, you have an agenda there, you have those things that you have to go through, but which ways can we do that? But that's actually the time that we all get together. And that is the only, and it can be for some departments, the only time that you see your whole department in one space. So how can we use those in a more effective way? So we're thinking about moving our games agenda to sending it out on an email, and actually they have a feedback column. That's our feedback, and they can fill that out at whatever time. And that's how we do our kind of our admin side of it. But that contact time is really important. We get 40 minutes every 2 weeks. So in reality, that's not very long, but we need to make sure that time is really effective and worthwhile for them as much as it is for us.
Well, isn't it? It's got to be inclusive.
That sounds great. And I'm sure your staff really appreciate as well you taking the time to have those one-on-one meetings. So listen, that's been a great chat. I'm sure directors of sport will get lots of that. Hopefully they'll take it on board in September. So once again, thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate your time, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.